Nick and Ashley, it's great to be with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about church planting. And I guess I know you guys, but we want the whole diocese and, other people to know a little bit about your story. So can you tell us a little bit what's drawn you to church planting?
I think the first thing that drew us to church planning was simply we had a bird. We saw a need in a community that we loved, which was Des Moines, that didn't have a sacramental and charismatic expression of the church, at least that we could see. And we loved that community and we loved those people, and we felt like maybe the Lord was tapping us on the shoulder and asking us to do it.
Yeah, anything to add to that?
Uh, Only to say that this was never part of our 10-year plan, planting a church. But you know how that goes.
Yeah, and I love the fact that really Anglicanism is somewhat alien to that area. There's just not a lot of expressions like that. So there's a real beauty to try to introduce something that's never been seen there
Yeah.
before. How about C4SO? What drew you to plant with our diocese? There's a unique story there, but
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about that.
I think for us, it started theological. We had a desire to really put our feet in a sacramental expression of the church and minister out of that. But as we grew to get to know you and to get to know our church planning cohort, and also just to come and meet other clergy, we realized there was a cultural connection to that.
Mhm.
We saw the world the same a little bit, not exactly, but enough that we felt like the people who we'd be ministering with in the diocese were uh, kindred. They're people we could learn
Yeah.
from and trust and be friends with.
I mean, we're a value-based diocese, so it's not going to be like we all look the same, but we do share the same values. I think that's part of this conversation. Um, so you guys are, your model is kind of a mix of two things. It's not a straight parachute drop where you go to a place and you don't know anybody and you're just going to make something happen. It's not a mother-daughter thing. You had some networks there,
Yeah.
right? So you moved to a place that you were familiar with, but you are really starting new. Can you describe that process for us?
Yeah, so we were on staff at a couple of different churches, actually on staff at a church plant in Des Moines, and on staff at a more established church many years ago at the beginning of our marriage. And so we have a network of relationships in Des Moines. Des Moines is where we started our family and our marriage. Our first two kids were born in Des Moines, so we definitely had some deep roots there. But we did have to move, and that was tough.
And you haven't lived there for how long?
Uh, this time around, about a year so far.
Okay.
We moved last July.
No, I mean, how long was it
Oh.
until you, like from
Oh.
the time you lived in Des Moines till you were back again?
We had been away for 6 years.
Yeah, so you're, in some ways, you have some networks and you're starting over again. Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It takes work to get back into those, get to know those people again, to get back into those networks, to see who you really connect with.
And that's that last year, right? The last year you've been sowing into relationships, neighborhood. You got a job in the community. You're in your kids' school.
Yeah, I'm at a school in the West Des Moines School District. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about what that last year's been like.
I think the year's been really, really encouraging and really at times difficult. You can't ever expect what's coming down the pike when you're planning a church. And while we have been blown away by all the things that God's done and the people that He's brought into our orbit, um, we also realize that like this is not. It's never easy. It's never cookie cutter. There's never a formula that you can just kind of copy and paste. And so it takes attention both to your own internal functioning so that you're living as healthily as you can in the process, but also just to what God's doing in and around you
Yeah.
and in your neighborhood.
Yeah, every church plant's a miracle and every church plant is a one-off. You can't predict it. It is a unique expression of the kingdom. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not meeting weekly. You've done a year of sowing in. You've used the Holy Week as kind of a preview season. Can you describe the preview season and then what's coming and what you're building towards in the fall?
Yeah. So we started Ash Wednesday. We've been renting sort of more event spaces rather than like any kind of even a school or more traditional church building, and we've been kind of internally calling them pop-up services. So they are preview services in that way.
Yeah. And So we kind of see these pop-up services being an opportunity for us to have a more public-facing expression, um, and then through this summer and into the fall, we'll start having more regular preview services. We're narrowing down a couple of locations for our
Mm.
permanent kind of worship space when we begin worshiping weekly. So we'll get into those spaces this summer, and we'll start worshiping and start just developing and growing into the church that God's going to have us be when we launch.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about like what you're doing right now is developing a core.
Yeah.
Describe, so there's different terminology. There's launch team, core team. How do you think of core and how have you developed it?
So we just call it our church planting team. It makes sense for our people. But we at first you just cast the net really really wide and you kind of see who comes in. But I found that as we've continued to grow both relationally with the people who've come around us, that now as we make a little bit more of a, I would say the first phase was kind of relationship building, and as we're making a shift now in these next 6 months before launch to really a more missional mindset, that there's actually more people hopping in the boat because they love that idea of like doing a little work and getting some stuff done.
Give me a job.
And
I want to be a part of this.
They want a job.
Yeah, it's the unique calling of a church plant to attract pioneers who want to be like, I want to help build this thing. That's the thing that you're doing now. Okay, so you're headed towards what looks like a September public launch. That's a weekly service. You're doing preview services. What are you most excited about with your public launch? What are you most nervous about?
We are pastors at heart, and so just meeting weekly is something we're very excited about. We have missed pastoring week in, week out, and just excited to see all the things God does. Up to this point, we've seen miracle after miracle, and we are trusting and hopeful that that will continue, trusting that people will come into the kingdom, that we'll see baptisms. We're really excited to celebrate communion together. We haven't done that yet as a church. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, what Ashley said, we like the mundane functioning of a church is what we love. We love the work of pastoring people, of encouraging people, of baptizing babies and doing all of those things is what we're most excited about. And we're more convinced than ever that God wants this church to exist, and that we were fortunate enough to raise our hand and say, we'll shepherd this thing along, and just to continue to see what he does.
Yeah, so you use interesting language. We're excited about celebrating communion, which introduces the topic of the fact that you guys are new to Anglicanism, right? So you're not ordained, you're licensed to plant from our diocese, but you're growing into this in the same way your congregation is. So the people you're reaching are not typically Anglicans, and they're kind of following in your wake a little bit. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we actually have a few Anglican nomads. Several churches in the diocese have gifted us couples who moved to Des Moines and kind of helped make that connection. So in some ways, we're learning from them as far as just living into the Anglican way, so to speak. But yeah, it is fun to learn together for sure.
And to have the resources from the diocese, the relationships that you can kind of lean on, to come down here to Christ Church and bring people to really let them see Anglicanism in
show and tell
on a Sunday morning is a really beautiful thing. And that process, I think people love to learn, and if they catch a glimpse of the kingdom and they see an expression of the church that resonates with their heart, I don't think it's hard. It takes intention, but I don't think it's hard.
You guys have been part of we've mentioned the cohort. What's your experience been like in a church planting cohort? So just for explanation, we have about 13 church plants in the diocese. We've split them into two halves, a year 2 and 3 cohort and a year 1, which is kind of the pre-launch and launch churches. There's 5 of those churches. What's that experience been like for you?
Like the best part of the whole thing. It was like oxygen to me at points. There are points in the process of church planting that feel incredibly lonely, and everybody tells you that, and you don't believe them. and then you get into it and you realize, oh yes, they were right. And to have a cohort of like-minded friends is just, it's a gift. It's a gift.
Yeah. And you've only been able to be a part of that since you've had your job, but do you have any interaction with the cohort? Like,
Yeah, it's coming to these things and having some of those relationships,
Yeah.
and then meeting in person, seeing what the rest of everybody's bodies looks like is it's been fun.
we're all in it together, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for this time together.
Thank you.